Hello, and thank you for watching this ag forecast for the western U.S. I'm Andrew Pritchard, Senior Meteorologist with Nutrien Ag Solutions. We'll check in with the jet stream here on Friday morning. Continues to be amplified across the Pacific Ocean, North America, and the Atlantic. A big ridge situated over the western U.S., a trough digging in across the Great Lakes and the eastern U.S., and then another ridge across the North Atlantic. The satellite picture this morning is reflective of that amplified pattern. Again, the big trough south of the Aleutian Islands. You can see that right here, very wrapped up. Our ridge here situated across the western half of the country, keeping things dry. And then we've got our trough digging into the Great Lakes, bringing in cool, dry air from the Canadian prairie. As we look at the last 72 hours of precipitation, completely dry across the western half of the country. We've seen some light showers make their way through the Great Lakes, pivoting around that trough, just cool, light hit or miss showers within that cool air mass there. And then from the southeastern U.S., Florida, all the way up the east coast into New England, we've seen a more broad area of showers and storms, bringing a half an inch to an inch of rainfall to those areas. Now, again, the pattern on the next 5 days on the left, days 5 through 10 over on the right. We are going to start to bring this trough across the Aleutian Islands south of that area off to the east as we get into the end of the next coming week. We're going to see a series of waves and another big Pacific jet extension that's going to help move this wave to the east, bringing it ashore across the Pacific Northwest, and that brings some precipitation back to the region. So everyone wants to know, when is it going to rain again? The answer to that question appears to be next weekend, at least across the Pacific Northwest, down into northern and central California. So the next 5 days over on the right, very dry, but then as we get into days 6 through 10, specifically getting into next weekend, October 10th and 11th, it looks like we'll reintroduce the chance for some rain across the northern half of the western U.S. Good agreement with the GFS as well, bringing in a soaking rain from central and northern California northward up the coast into British Columbia. Now, Eric and I have been watching this, and we've been talking together, and yesterday we did some analysis on the 10 wettest Octobers in the state of California. That's what you see over here on the left, the analysis here. And what we come up with is a big trough south of the Gulf of Alaska, sitting off the Pacific coast. What that does is then drive specific moisture eastward into the coast, creating a very wet environment across the state of California. And we see pretty good agreement with that portion of the outlook here as we look at the European forecast for next weekend. October 11th and 12th is what we're looking at here. Here's your big trough south of the Gulf of Alaska, extending down toward the west coast. What you don't have, though, is the big ridge across the Hudson Bay, across central Canada. Instead, we've still got a trough lingering in this region. So we have the piece of the pattern that brings the rain to California, but we don't necessarily have all the pieces that would suggest that the pattern stays like this. So is it a one-off? Are we going to bring in some soaking rain and then see the pattern flip back to dry across the west? That's the question that really lingers at this point. It does look like the rain is going to happen next weekend, but answering the question of whether or not we're going to be sticking in this pattern that supports precipitation across the region is the bigger question. Now, this wave is still way off to the west across Asia at this point, or at least the one that really helps get things moving. Here's the pattern now. We're looking at 500 millibar heights and vorticity, and where we see the color-shaded areas, that's areas of positive vorticity, and we use kind of look for where those waves are headed for the unsettled weather, cloud cover, and precipitation. So I'm going to just start to drag this into the weekend and next week. And then what you're going to see here, this is the wave. It only emerges across the western Pacific here Monday of this coming week. It then blasts from west to east across the Pacific here, taking a couple of waves that are just meandering off the coast and then pushing them ashore right there as we get into, look, way out there still, October 10th and 11th. So we'll look at the jet stream response here. Again, very wavy, very amplified as we look at the flow across the Pacific and North America here on Friday. Continuing to be amplified. Let me go ahead and bring this back. We'll click through time. Amplified through the weekend. And then you start to see the beginnings of it right. It's not even that one. That's another wave that kind of reinforces this pattern. Here it is. Here comes the big Pacific jet extension as we get into October 9th and 10th. This is the one that brings that trough ashore then. All of that energy back behind it helps bring this trough ashore, and that's what helps finally get precipitation going across the region. So let's bring it back. We'll look at the precipitation forecast. Again, just keeping a wide picture on this just so we can see all of the moving parts as we head through the next 5 to 7 days, really, through the weekend into early next week, into mid next week. The pattern continues to deflect these areas of low pressure and the associated moisture north over the ridge through the Gulf of Alaska into Canada, and then over that ridge down into the Canadian Prairie, and then eventually the Great Lakes. So as we head through the next 5 to 7 days, the western U.S. is certainly going to be protected by this ridge and going to be kept dry. So you can see that in effect here. We go through Wednesday, now we're getting into Thursday. Now we're going to start to see this thing break down. You can almost see the push right here looking at the surface pressure and precipitation forecast. There it is. That wave comes in back there Friday, October 9th into the 10th and pushes the moisture, pushes the trough ashore, bringing that rain into portions of California, Oregon, and Washington. Right now, the operational model run from last night, the European, bringing rain all the way to Southern California as we get into Sunday. So this would be just fantastic news. The ensembles are on board. We're looking at the probability of picking up an inch of rainfall or more over the next 14 days, all the way through the middle of October. And again, you see nearly 100% probability across western Washington and Oregon, but even getting into the 40 to 50% range here across north central portions of California. We'll then look at the fire weather risk. Of course, over the next couple of days, at times we'll see an elevated risk across southern California. And then as we head through the day today, parts of Wyoming seeing some blustery winds and low humidity. We'll see the smoke beginning to return across parts of the west again, as well as that ridge continues to spin. Rather stagnant air from California up to Washington and Oregon as we go through the weekend. So smoky conditions primarily across central and northern California, but then at times up across the Pacific Northwest as we head through the weekend as well. Now, what's going to help keep the fire weather risk a little bit lower, even with the heat and the low humidity across the area, is going to be the relatively calm winds as we head through the weekend into early next week. Again, not really looking at a big pressure gradient across the region. So the stronger winds are going to be associated with those clipper-like systems, those little lows making their way out of the Canadian Prairie into the Great Lakes, with winds relatively quiet across the west over the next 5 days or so. Now we'll look at the temperature forecast as we head through the week, keeping heat across the west until we get to next weekend. If we really are, well, I say if, but it looks as if we are going to bring that trough ashore. And of course, doing so, introducing a lot more in the way of cloud cover and precipitation, will be taming those temperatures a bit, bringing in a cooler pattern across the west as well. Now, heat's going to be on for the next 5 days or so. We'll look at those high temperatures just to wrap up this video. We'll be ratcheting the temperatures up to the 90s and the hundreds here for the afternoon today, keeping that going as we head into the weekend. We'll see temperatures taming a bit as we head into Monday and Tuesday, upper 80s and lower 90s across the region. You can find some triple-digit heat across Southern California into the valley there in Arizona. Same holds true for Tuesday. And again, this is going to be the general temperature pattern as we head even into Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of next week. But we'll watch for a potential change as we get into next weekend, both in the form of some rain across the west and some cooler temperatures. So when do we see some change? Next weekend. Have a great Friday, a wonderful weekend. We'll talk to you again on Monday.